chalk and pastel. I began, because with color, I'm never really sure, even now. My use of color tends to be very intuitive. It's very much trial and error. And so I would be layering to try to find my way. And I worked on the wall. And after a while, the pastel, the chalk was just really falling off the paper. And so I came to the realization that if I was going to continue using color, I would need to move to paint. And that was very scary. The last time I had any contact with paint was in sophomore year of my undergraduate art education. So that was really, I still have the oil paints from that time, I'm just saying. So if I was going to continue working with color, I was really going to need to move to paint. And it's been a long and sometimes painful learning experience, and I still feel like a newbie, but in some ways, you know, particularly in recent years, I've found myself immersed in what I would call a spiritual connection to color in my work. And certainly there's plenty of drama in the work that I'm doing now. And it does, although I don't use black, a lot of the forms that are more reductive than what you see here, those forms can read as black or very dark, and then juxtaposed with color. So yeah, I mean, it all informs. It is interesting because when I took these out of the flat file, I found something I had cut out. It was a leaf form. It was like I didn't want to let go of it. I wanted to keep it, you know, to kind of use it as a stencil if I wanted to or whatever. And so there was that moment of like, you know, maybe, and I'm like, no, you know, I'm someplace else now. So that's where I have to be. As lovely as these are, it's just, I'm not there right now. And I hope that whatever it is I'm making, well, it's what I need to make in this moment. So did that?
Yes, and it's all connected, and you're a person of the present, like we all really are.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you,
Beautiful.
everybody, for listening.
And let's move on to Fred Bendtime, who I believe is ready and able now. You here, Fred?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hi, Fred.
Hi.
Fred, congratulations. This is a beautiful show. Your work is bold and crisp, but also grounded and harmonious. What's your secret? Can you talk about your approach to your subject matter?
Well, I'll answer the second question first. I was like, with this piece, I was interested in spirals. I've been interested in them in a long time. I like how they move, and then they're also still at the same time. So they have that sort of tension. And I remember seeing them when I was growing up in Arizona on the desert, as petroglyphs, and they always fascinated me. And they've been used actually a lot in modern art, especially 20th century art. You think of Robert Smithson spiral jetty or somewhere like that. So they connect to the land and the sky for me, and there's sort of images of nature, like also you see them in nature a lot, snails and galaxies and thumbprints. So this painting, so I contrasted the spiral with the geometric series of diamonds, which I kind of think of as frames, like a frame of a painting, so several frames, in the hopes that it would make the curves of the spiral more curvy, and then And then the spiral makes the straight lines of the diamonds more geometric straight. They sort of play off each other. Yeah, so that's the subject matter. Secret. My secret is that I drink a lot of water.
Ah, we know your secret.
And I'm drinking some right now.
Me too. I hope that helps. Well, thanks, Fred. Let me ask you this. It seems like each time we see new work of yours, your approach is more developed, more sophisticated in palette. And can you particularly speak about your use of transparencies?
Yeah, I started doing that with these shape paintings 7 or so, 8 years ago, maybe. Remember thinking of doing that. Well, so you get the third layer, I mean the third color, overlapping like the transparency, so it adds more color to the pieces, and then it kind of plays against the sculptural aspect of the pieces being shaped. So I kind of like that. It's doing the sort of very sculptural, physical thing, and then the very transparent, ethereal thing at the same time. Yeah, and kind of like this piece, it seemed to work like with the organic again against the hard edge. Those are sort of playing against each other as well. So.
Yeah, so beautiful here. And it really keeps me engaged as a viewer. I keep finding different ways to look at it and different ways to wonder about it. It's really kind of unique how you do this. So.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Yeah, I came up with the, I'm sure I came up with the organic kind of coral looking thing first. And then after I did it, I kind of realized they had 5 fingers on each side, and so it reminded me of hands. But I don't set out to make hands. I know that. But then after I designed it, I saw the hands, and then I named it the cat's cradle, like the string through of the hands, sort of the play on that. Yeah, and then I was also thinking about this piece, that it's like the colors, the pink and the green they were used a lot in the Renaissance by the Venetian painters. You think of like Bellini or someone like that, or Giorgione. These are their favorite colors for some of them. And yeah, just to tie in with the color of language, how certain colors seem to work. Yeah, having said that, I mean, I'm much more of a Florentine when it comes to this debate of color versus form. The form always comes first for me. So, and then the color, it just seems like that should be the color. But the form is what I really work on.
So you're very intuitive about the color. That's amazing. Yeah. Because it looks, well, it's so crafted that it looks very planned to me because it's so successful.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Well, the drawing is, I draw it first. So the shape is definitely planned. And then the color, it's more intuitive. Yeah, I can play around with the color once I have the shape. Yeah. So yeah,
Yeah,
I like all the white shapes that you see, in between the forms too, part of the piece. So the wall, so the wall becomes part of the piece.
Yeah, I love that about it also. And these pieces are also riveting because of their symmetry. Can you talk about what draws you to symmetrical composition?
Yeah, well, yeah, like I was saying, I don't normally do symmetrical pieces. I've done just very few. There's my wife sneezing in the background. Yeah, so these, I had a third piece in the show, but there wasn't enough room, which isn't symmetrical. So I just chose these 2 because they were almost symmetrical. But I mean, as a composition, I always like a balanced, almost always do a balanced composition, which is different from symmetrical, but these are definitely balanced as well. But they have kind of a meditative quality. The symmetry kind of, I think it draws the viewer sort of into himself in a way, as well as looking at the work or herself.
Absolutely. I love that about them.
Yeah.
And they invite long viewing. And I think that's part of the symmetry as well. Like you said, it creates a relationship with the viewer. Beautiful, Brad. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Yeah. I don't know, did you see the details, Susan? Were you able to get those details? No, okay, no problem.
I'm sorry, Fred, I didn't receive those.
Oh, I put them in the Dropbox, no problem. It's not,
Oh.
you can probably, maybe you can zoom in on your screen, maybe, I don't know. Go see the work in person, you can look at it up close.
That's true. Or maybe we can grab them from the Dropbox when we're finished with the PowerPoint.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, no, it doesn't matter, but it's interesting to see the they're made out of one board. So if you can see that the edges are painted as well, so they're sculptural in that way.
Thank you, Fred.
Okay, thanks, Mary.
And let's move on to Amanda Michelle Brown. Let's take a
Hello.
look at her pieces. Hello, Amanda. And we have a few details of Amanda's. So Amanda, congratulations and welcome. This is your first project space show at 440. One of the things that we love about hanging our shows in the project space is the relationships that are created by the works as they're juxtaposed with one another. And I wonder, how do you feel these relationships affect your work?
Yeah, glad to be here, first of all. I was a little nervous coming into it because obviously this is the first show that I've done here at 440 Gallery. So I was like, are you sure they're all gonna work together? Like, we had this like uniting vision of how we all use color, but I was like, is that gonna be enough to like connect each of them together? And so I was a little bit nervous up until I saw it hung. And then once I saw all the pieces together, each of it just like kind of all made sense. The like luminosity that you see in both Ellen and Fred's work, I feel like also comes through in my like watercolors, and just like my use of like organic shapes and Ellen's use of organic shapes and Fred's use of like balancing like the geometric and the organic comes through in mine too. So there's like a bunch of little pieces that connect, and I was like, okay, wow. You just need to see them all together to like get the full picture. And especially if you go and see the show, how they like flow one piece into the next. It's just, I was excited to see it. I was shocked, pleasantly shocked.
They really complement one another. It's beautiful. So one thing that I love about your work is the sense of freedom and playfulness of your approach to materials. Can you talk about the materials that you use and what draws you to work this way?
Yeah, so I really like to think of my materials as a co-creator in the work that I make. I find that if I have too much control over the like, at least the beginning stages, I don't like it. It just ends up feeling too contrived to me. So I really like letting all of the works that you see here are in watercolor. I really like letting the like unruliness of watercolor shine through. And you end up getting some really interesting moments that I couldn't do if I intentionally tried to save my life. And just finding those moments to be able to be like, that's it. That's the thing that I like. Really feels collaborative. And so that's kind of where that like first freedom comes, because I'm really letting go of my control, which is saying something because I'm kind of a control freak. but then that I get to bring that back in the end with my detail work. So it does feel a lot like a balancing act of like, how much do I let go? How much do I reel it back in? So the organic shapes always come first. And then for me, it's like tying it all together with that more like structure, giving it a form, and kind of making sense of the randomness.
So you're using watercolor, and then what other materials?
Yeah, so watercolor, the detail work is like a Posca pen, a paint pen. And I've started bringing in more mixed media. So there's like graphite in this one, and some of my like more recent work will have like, I think there's pastel in this one too. And like starting to like do some spray paint, but not in any of these. But so I'm letting go in more mediums now.
Interest. Thank you. And I'm also very interested in your work here in terms of scale, because I'm not sure if you can tell in this format, but one of these pieces is quite a bit larger than the others. And it gives the viewer a kind of immersive experience with the forms. It makes me wonder how you feel about scale, and what do you have in mind for future work?
Yeah, I always like the idea of going as big as I can. Mostly because I like that like immersive feeling. I want the viewer to be able to feel like they could almost just like dive right into the color, and kind of get lost in some of like the more juicier bits. But I mean, it's always a matter of like how much space you have, how much paper can you buy. But I'm always open to the idea of going giant.
I look forward to seeing that. Yeah, can you go back one, I think, Susan?
Oops.
Obviously. Which is the big one? The next one, right?
The green, the one with the green on the, yeah, that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this one you can definitely like, you can stand right up against it, kind of lose that periphery, and you're just immersed in color. And I love that.
And it also, something about it being bigger makes all the forms feel more dimensional. Like, and that, I guess, brings you into it as well. Beautiful work, Amanda. Thank you.
Thank you.
And so now we can open to questions from the group.
I'm going to see if I can bring up Fred's details.
Okay.
So let's see.
And in the meantime, if you have a question, you can just unmute and go ahead and address the artist. Questions or comments are welcome.
Well, I'll make a comment about something that Fred said that really resonated with me about the form coming first and then the color following it. And that certainly is something that is true for me. And I never really thought about it in that way. And I thank you, Fred, for that. Although I mean, your sophisticated use of color and your craft in creating those, I mean, I don't know if people realize that the cat's cradle is one piece, so that all of those cuts were done with enormous precision, and it's really, really impressive.
Yes, I was wondering about that also, because it is so precise. And how do you achieve that level of precision?
Well, I use a material called PVC board, which is a lot like the density of wood. I used to use wood, but then I started using this because it won't splinter and doesn't have grain. So you can you don't have to fight the grain. So I use a lot of, well, to cut it, I use mostly a jigsaw, and then I use little knives and files and sanding. So I don't, there's a detail. And then I do taping, a lot of masking tape to get the hard edge. Yeah, there's, so yeah, it's sort of a process, like, you know, it's like woodworking where you cut and then file, sand. It's kind of, it's laborious, and it's kind of dusty too. Yeah.
Yeah, you could see how many holes this has. And how, what he was talking about, that the wall is part of it, that seeing the wall through the negative space gives it a whole different experience.
And the shadows too.
Mhm.
Yeah, the lighting will change the piece, how it's lit. Yeah, well, I was going to say about, we had a comment, Amanda, about your work. We were saying that the shapes are reminiscent of stone. Did you think of that when you make them?
So I really sort of. I'm totally inspired by nature as well. Like I love being next to Ellen's like leaves because I love those forms, and your anemone, your anemone hands. So they're like stones, but they're also like more micro than that. Like they also feel to me a little bit like amoebas sometimes, or like just like really, really microscopic little guys, which is why I also like making them really big, just blowing up the little guys to be huge.
Yeah, well, they definitely have like an organic kind of living feeling to them. Yeah, could be a lot of things. I guess that's the power of abstraction. It has a wide reach.
Ellen, I had a question for you. I was wondering, because I'm always kind of fascinated by looking back at work that was done earlier and how that shapes what you've done, what you're doing presently, and how there's always sort of threads between all the work. And I was just wondering, now that you've sort of spent time with this work that that was from earlier, is there anything that you feel you're considering to sort of incorporate into your present work?
Not directly. It's been interesting to look at these, and I mean, actually, some of the work I'm doing now is more directly connected to work that I did even earlier. So that's been kind of an interesting connection to me. And I didn't see it. One of my daughters was like, "Mom, this looks like your sculpture." So, so that can come together. What looking at these has done is something I was thinking about anyway, was to work just experimentally in some smaller ways, maybe go back to using some pastels or playing with oil crayons and oil stick and things like that, and seeing what has happened in terms of my interest in color if I went back to using those, but nothing more specific than that.
Thank you.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And actually, Fred, we didn't ask you about these pieces informing work as you move forward. I was thinking particularly about the meditative aspect of it, if that's something you want to keep going with.
I want to keep going just with meditation, period.
Are you a meditator?
Yes, I try, yeah. But yeah.
I had another question for Amanda. Trying to find you in the boxes. Let's see. Well, anyway.
Here.
Oh, you're right next to me. Okay. So I was wondering, like, I love the fact that your work is, it's sort of like improvisation, like you find your ideas as you're working. And I'm wondering, do you have any sort of idea of what you're envisioning when you start, or is it just like that first mark or that first wash kind of tells you what the next thing will be?
Yeah, definitely the second one. I kind of think of it like the metaphor in my head is that like you're walking down a path and there's a fork and you kind of just like keep picking the forks in the road, and sometimes it leads you absolutely nowhere. And sometimes you're like, oh hey, this worked out. And just knowing when you arrive at the destination that you want to be at, it's very spontaneous, but also like I try to not be too precious, which is why I like working in paper. And that a lot of the pieces in the show are actually on bamboo paper, because the only thing I get precious with them like trees. So I like using a rapidly renewable resource, but I feel a little bit better about, cranking through a lot of work and seeing where the path takes me if I'm, not having to stretch it all the time.
Right. Makes sense.
Amanda, could you talk about bamboo paper? I'm not familiar with it, and I want to know where to buy it and what's the texture like, and how is it any different to work with really from regular paper?
It is a little bit. It doesn't have the brand that I use is called, I'm gonna butcher the name. It's some German name with like a little umlaut on it. Hemimule, I think is how you pronounce it. It doesn't have the same like tooth that you would get from like an Arches, but it works pretty well for me. Like other than not having that same texture that I would potentially like the bigger piece, because they don't make paper that big. That's an Arches. So you can kind of, if you look at both of them together, you can see like, oh yeah, this one has a little bit more like, I don't know what the word is, but this than the bamboo ones. But I like being for the smaller sizes to be able to like use a lot of it. And that's kind of the trade-off for me. If it had more tooth, I would love it to the moon and back.
Yeah, I wanted to ask Amanda something if I could. First of all, the work is amazing. I'm really blown away. But I'm interested, this is kind of the first time I've seen your work. So I'm wondering, what's the trajectory? Like, do you have a sense of like where you came from, and is the work you're doing now, do you have a feeling of it kind of going in a certain direction?
Yeah, I think I've definitely started noticing more of a direction that I'm going compared to where I've been. Like, I feel like looking at like my past work, some of the edges of my watercolor blobs were more loose, and I feel like I'm tightening that up. And so part of me is wondering if I'm like getting to the point in my use of watercolor where I like know it too well, where I'm like, I've kind of like mastered's the wrong word, but like understand it to the point that like I'm losing some of that happenstance that I like value so much in my work. So part of me is wondering if I like need to move on to a different medium, and that's kind of why I'm like bringing in more mixed media with my paperwork. So that's kind of the path that I'm starting to see myself go. And I don't know how much of that is also like environmental factors. If I'm like creating these like tighter shapes because of the world being a hot mess and me wanting to find some control someplace, who knows? But I kind of approach the art making in the same, on a broad scale, the same way I approach it on like an individual level, is I'll like just kind of look at the piece and see like, what does this need? What am I feeling? What's the vibe, and go from there. So TBD.
I had one other question. Forgive me, I'm full of questions tonight. Fred, so you switched over from using wood to using the material you use now. Um, um, do you find, is there anything that that you miss from using wood, or is there something like, do you find that you know, your work changed somehow by changing the material, the surface that you're working on?
Um, well, there's an echo, sorry. Yeah, I was using wood for quite a while, and then I sort of did a transition to this other material called MDF board, which is a kind of composite. And I still occasionally do use wood. It's just I had a piece warp and that was on wood, and it was a real pain. I had to have a metal brace built for the back to straighten it out. And so I said, I'm not doing this anymore. So then I switched to this PVC board. And like I said, it doesn't have any grain, which which is a benefit for me. It is toxic, and I get worried sometimes. You know, I try to wear a mask when I'm working with it, but sometimes I forget, and that's well, but yeah, it's like it's pretty much the same. It works just like wood, same density. So it hasn't really changed my work much. Switching, no. Just maybe made it a little bit easier, which is good.
Oh, good. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Okay, I got a question for Ellen. Ellen, were you influenced by Georgia O'Keeffe with this work?
Well, a lot of people have asked me about that over the years, and I was making those kinds of forms before I knew about Georgia O'Keeffe, you know, further back. I mean, Georgia O'Keeffe, Matisse, I mean, these are all, of course, influences on me. But I was, the organic form and line and edge were part of my vocabulary way back before I had any idea of where I was going with it, if that makes sense.
No, they're not. I mean, they're definitely separate, from her, but they have the same vein. But and I love her work, and talk about symmetry. Why she's amazing the way she does symmetrical, almost symmetrical work sometimes. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, like the enlarging the natural world like that. Yeah.
Right. Well, I've always, I mean, hers sometimes are more, well, these are very specific in a way, but I've always been interested in ambiguity of scale, whether I'm drawing rocks, which I have done a lot of also, Amanda, previously, a lot of rock forms, pod forms, that sense, like what are you looking at? Is it a mountain, or is it a microscopic something? And of course, I've always had the female references in my work, and they have been there for such a long time. And those of you who know me and knew me in my other life, I worked in birth for 35 years. So it all kind of comes together in a way that it's not, it's not linear, but it's all there.
And thank you, Ellen. And Joy has a question, I believe, for everyone, all three artists. How did you learn about color? Study, self-taught, experimentation? Good question. Do you want to start, Ellen?
Okay, mine is, well, I went to art school back when people were still living in caves. And so we had a lot of very formal training, but I didn't work with color and I didn't retain any of it. And so when I came to color, it's intuitive, it's trial and error. I've been thinking lately that maybe I ought to, actually learn something. You're never quite sure whether that's going to be a good thing or a bad thing, because it takes a long time for those who have gone to art school to let go of a lot of what you've learned and keep the things that are important. But mine is very intuitive, and I feel like sometimes for that reason is limited. And I look at the other two artists in this show, and I really marvel about the way that each of them uses color. And it makes me want to know more.
Yeah, so Amanda, what about you?
I just think, can I pick all three? Like, I feel like
Yeah.
there's definitely some study in there. Because yeah, art school, but also I worked for years as a graphic designer where color is very important. But also I think a lot of it's experimentation. And I think like looking at my work over the years, there's like phases of different color usage. And there's some times where I've just almost like set challenges for myself where I'm like, I'm going to only make pieces with colors that I would never pick ever, just to kind of like push myself out of my color comfort zone. So it's a little bit of all of them, I'd say.
Thank you. And how about you, Fred?
Yeah, definitely more the experimental and intuitive approach for me. But yeah, for a while I was tending to do a lot of use of primary colors on these pieces, and then I got kind of tired of that. So then yeah, just experimented with other colors, and occasionally I'll do black and white work, which that's always interesting too. But
And Joy's added to this question, who are the artists who use color that you look at?
Well, I always think of you know, like how Picasso was not a colorist, you know, but he's, you know, obviously great, you know, so he used a lot of black and white, you know, and versus Matisse. I love Matisse too. He was, yeah, his colors were, so I love his colors. I'd say he was more a colorist. So getting back to, he was the Venetian and Picasso was the Florentine of the pair. There always seems to be this kind of dichotomy amongst painters that I see.
And Richard has a question. You're muted still, Richard. Can you unmute, Richard?
Unmute it, okay.
There you
I'm of the view that a lot of things come to be true or seem to be true because people say them enough. And I love Picasso's color, and I find Picasso as interesting a colorist and an artist as Matisse. And I love his work, and I love what he does with color. And I think if you go to the Museum of Modern Art and spend some time with the Picassos, you'll see what I'm getting at. And it's a great range of how he uses color in his work, okay? But I think that the idea that artists can pick and choose how they use color is bogus, because I think that in the end, what they'll do is they work with how they work with color is the same way that composers work with notes. There are only so many ways that people can put something together and make it sound like themselves. They won't think any other way. And if you can't, and so the idea that you can choose is to me bogus. It really is. You may have some options, but I think that's all. You can't use color like Matisse or like Seurat because you're not Matisse or Seurat.
Okay, I want to speak to that. I mean, just in the sense that I sometimes have to work very hard not to make everything red. You know, I have to work at it, not to make everything red. But I find as I get more and more into color, I just want to look at Rothko. It's like I want to be Rothko. I can't be Rothko. Rothko already existed, and his work exists, and it's far beyond anything that I could ever imagine making.
I dislike Rothko's paintings, but fine if you like his work.
I like his work a lot, and I like.
No, I don't.
Okay, but I love the fact, and this sort of.
I think he said it in the first 6 paintings that he did, and then the rest of it was just repetition. That's what I think. They're boring.
Well, let me speak to something that links Amanda's work and Fred's work and my work, which is that we all are working toward a meditative and spiritual place. And I think that that was a big part of Rothko. You may find it boring. I don't find it boring. And it's something that I feel that I really can learn from. And I'm just curious whether Amanda and Fred have any affinities with that.
Well, what I find interesting about Rothko is, yeah, he's definitely a colorist. He's the Venetian of the abstract expressionist. He reduced the form to these clouds, these sort of rectangular clouds, so that they're sort of the form is sort of out of the way. You don't really care about the form. It's just all color. It's like you're looking at cloud, color clouds. And yeah, and then you contrast that with maybe Pollock, who was great colorist, but he's all about line, really, isn't he? So that's the form he uses. Yeah. It's like,
Joy has another question.
Ellen, I recall you talking about, I think it was you, where you see colors and you have aroma associated with them.
No, not
That wasn't you, but
No,
there's a phenomenon with that, right?
No, I have synesthesia, but
You have
it's
words?
not with words, letters, numbers, and words have color for me. And
Okay.
I didn't realize until I was well into adulthood that that's not true for everybody.
Can you
So,
talk about that a little bit? If you'd like to.
Yeah, I mean, it was even stronger when I was a kid, but I mean, I definitely, numbers have very, very definitive colors, and my ability to remember a phone number often has to do with how the colors, like if it's too disparate, I'm like, well, that's a terrible number. Who would want to have that number? No, it's a little crazy, I know. And people's names and, their colors associated with it. And I have one of my sisters has it too, but our colors are completely different.
so have you ever painted numbers?
I tried once, but it was boring. So I let it go. Yeah, it was stupid. So I was like, I don't want to paint numbers. I thought I would try to somehow, but it's just a phenomenon. And there are people who have it with sound. I don't have it with sound. There are people who see color with sound. And it's possible that also with aroma. And there is, I mean, some people have done studies. I know my sister participated in a study about it, and, does it run in families? I have one daughter who has it and one daughter who doesn't. But it's one of those shocking things, like when you're young, you're just like, oh, okay, yeah, everybody has this. And then when somebody says, what are you talking about? And then you realize, no, it's a particular phenomenon, but I don't know if it, I mean, I know, as I said before, I know that there are colors that I'm very pulled toward, and sometimes like Amanda, not enough like Amanda. Amanda's much better at this, I can tell already. It's hard to pull myself away from it. And I think Fred has a much more sophisticated understanding of color than I have. And I marvel at that. And I'm curious, Fred, like, do you, where you have the transparencies, is that how, that isn't an actual transparency, it's you creating the color. That
it's an illusion of transparency.
Exactly.
It's the combination of the two colors.
Blows my mind. I'm sorry. It just
Well,
does.
it's no, thank you, but it's not that tricky, really. You just I have all these cups of color. So I got the pink and the green cup, and then to get the other one, I just mix the two,
Right, but still, there's, you make it sound very easy. And I think anybody who's worked, who's made any kind of art, it's like the same way you make it sound easy to cut those forms. It's not easy. It's a great skill. So.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it's.
She's going to have to drink more water, Fred.
Yeah, keep drinking more.
So this is a question for Susan. Lynn says, will the recording of this be available to us? And if so, how to access it? You're muted, Susan.
It will be on our website. Unfortunately, I had pressed record at the beginning and something made me check on it while Ellen was speaking, and I checked and it wasn't recording. So there's a little bit that's not on the beginning of it, but the rest of it will be available on the website in a few days.
Do we also have a YouTube channel?
I
Are
believe
they getting posted on the YouTube channel?
that I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Amy usually takes care of that.
Okay, I believe they are, but I'm going to check on that. Because if you go to the YouTube channel, then you can just watch everything that you're interested in, because it has all of our recordings.
Let me see if I find it.
Another question from Joy.
Do you have a favorite color? Do you hate that question? I don't have a favorite color because I love them all, but
I think I already admitted mine.
red, red, yeah.
I think it's so funny that you use red so much. I hardly ever use red. It's just, it's such an intense color for me that I just like, it overpowers everything else for me. So I'm like, I can't. But I think that it's very interesting. I use a lot of pink though, a lot of pink.
Is that a favorite color of yours, Amanda?
In life, not really, but in painting, for some reason, it has the like, the oomph of red with just like enough electricity that I don't know, I like it. And I definitely go through like color phases. Like I went through like years of burnt sienna, like all about that burnt sienna, but I finally moved past. Now I'm on to the next. Feeling like lime green might be the moment.
How about you, Fred? Do you have a favorite color?
No, I don't have any favorite color, but I think I was mentioning also, yeah, growing up in Arizona, those sunsets, like you see these crazy colors in the sky there. And so I tend to use a lot of those bright colors. To me, they're just normal. But I was also thinking of other painters. I know I heard Jasper Johns say his favorite color is gray. And
Figures.
yeah, I mean, he does all those gray paintings. Which don't appeal to me, that the color, but the people love them. So yeah, I guess, yeah. But no, I don't have a favorite color. I don't.
Gail, are you raising your hand for a question? Go ahead and unmute. You're still muted.
There we go.
Yeah.
What I wanted to say, listening to the three of you talk about the absolutely exquisite color that is happening in that back room, is I go back there and I have to take a breath every time. And I'm a color. Color means the world to me. I mean, I think about it. It's how I move forward with my work. My work starts with decision making about what color I'm jumping into. But the thing that all of you, I mean, there's so many things that you're sharing, but there's this beautiful tone. There's this depth that comes out of every one of your work. There are veils that gosh, I feel like color from all of you is sweeping over me. It's just like, that color is coming over me when I go back there. It's deep, deep, deep. There's a tone, like I said, to it that is so impressive and so gorgeous. And just sitting at the gallery and watching people, I have watched people be affected by it. There's a depth to it that pulls them in, and you have all achieved that in using color. And I congratulate you. It's just an elegant, exquisite show that the three of you have done, and that's it. Wow. Okay. I swooned over that show when I went back there. I really did. So I'll stop now. Thank you.
Gail. And on that note, let's just get a final congratulations to Ellen, Amanda, and Fred. And I want to let you all know about some upcoming things. So Artist Invite Artists is having a artist talk, same time next week. So that's February 6th at 4:40. There's also a closing party. Mark your calendars for February 13th from 2 to 4 p.m. That's for this show and Artist Invite Artists. And that's going to be in real life. And I also wanted to mention the next show coming up is Richard Barnett's Ghosts of War. And that's going to be up from February 16th through March 20th. The reception is February 19th from 2 to 4. Looking forward to that, Richard. And,
Thank you, I am too.
and Ellen has an upcoming show, and so does Fred, that I want them to tell you about.
Well, I've been asked, that two of my paintings are going to be at St. Joseph's College in Clinton Hill in Brooklyn. The St. Joseph's College Council for the Arts has a show called Color Recall, and it's running from March 9th to April 23rd. And details will probably be on the 440 announcements, as well as if you get my MailChimps, I will be sending that out as well. So hope to see you there. Fred.
Thank you, Ellen. And how about you, Fred?
Yeah, I'll be having a solo show at a place called Spoke the Hub. It's in on Union Street, 748 Union Street in Brooklyn. And that will be opening March 6th. And yeah, I'll send out invites. And if you're not on my mailing list, you can join on my website. Anyway, I'll be showing about 10 small pieces.
Great. And yeah, stay tuned on the social media. And like I said, you can always go to our 440gallery.com website and check out the shows on Artsy and make purchases if you'd like.
Karen, could you repeat that date for the Artist Invite Artists opening or party?
Well, it's actually the closing. It's going to be on the
Closing.
last. We tried to have an opening reception and it was frigid. So that's why we're asking the weather goddess to be kind to us for February 13th from 2 to 4 p.m.
Thank you. February 13th from 2 to 4.
It's a Sunday.
Okay. February 13th, 2 to 4.
2 Sundays from now.
Yeah, I see it. I have a ticket to a concert those days. You know, it's hell being a cultivated person because you run into this double and triple booking. You know, you want to go to one thing and you've got a ticket to another and you're mentally ill and you don't really know what to do.
Well, hopefully you could come to the artist talk for Artists Invite Artists. That'll be on the 6th of February.
That's when the concert is.
Oh, so the 13th, will you make it to the closing?
No, I'm sorry. The concert is on the 13th.
Okay, so next weekend, next Sunday, at the same time, same place.
Oh, that's the artist talk.
Link. You'll need to register for that one.
Okay.
And but it's still at 4:40, and it's still on Zoom.
And that's on the 6th.
That's on the 6th, so I'm really looking forward to that. Ellen and I will be talking about curating, and then we have 4 artists that we're going to interview.
And the time of that artist talk on Zoom is what, 4:40?
It's one of our Sundays at 4:40 events. Yeah.
Got it.
Just to make it easy to remember the time.
That's
If you
right.
remember the name of the gallery, then you know the time.
No, yeah, no, I know. I've gone with that.
And you can remember the address too.
That's right.
All of it. All of it.
Such convenience. Well, thanks everyone for coming.
Thanks
For
to
your
you.
questions and comments, and stay warm. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
You
Okay,
too.
thank you. Thanks,
You
Karen.
can.
Thanks to everybody. See you later.
Bye.
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 Bye-bye.